So I think we'll make a start. I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly. We've got 20 minutes to talk about live streaming, predominantly for hybrid events. So I think the first thing to say, here is my screen share. The first thing to say is that for a lot of people, I think hybrid is quite worrying and sounds expensive, sounds complicated. And the challenge is, how do you get people who are remote, particularly speakers, and those in the room to speak at the same time, to have an event that works for both sets of people, virtual and in the room. And we've done this. We've probably done it about 20 times now. For me, I've got another one actually next week, but the last one I did was just before Christmas, so in December, and that was in Norway. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. My co-founder of event.video is here, Mike. He's based in America. I'm based in the UK. And I think the challenge for Mike today is that you're losing your voice, aren't you, Mike? So...
I am. It's day three of this. It's slowly coming back, but of course it had to happen now.
Well, we'll bear
I'm
with you.
I'm giving you like center stage. I'm letting you take care of most of it.
Oh,
I'll answer questions when needed.
For the first time. Well, I want to start by finding out a little bit about the audience. So if you don't know who event.video are, kind of the name says it all. We've run over 350 events during the pandemic, so most of them virtual. We are partners with VII. We're also partners with Brella, Swapcard, and we've worked on, I would say, about another 40 event platforms. So if you're a Bizzaboo fan, Goldcast, Grip, Hopin, I've experienced the highs and the lows of using all of them. And basically, if you want to talk about that, I've got some tips as well. But the big thing for me is that I am a camera guy and an editor. So I wanted to get back to normal, in inverted commas, and I really like hybrid. So I was live streaming before the pandemic around the world. And now that we are moving, certainly in the UK, I mean, I was talking to one of our colleagues in India earlier, and it seems to be going backwards there, more restrictions and lockdowns. So I know that it's different for different people around the world. But in the UK, things are opening up, and in the US, it is as well. And some of the quotes that people receive for doing live streaming are astronomical. So I wanted to just explain to you that it doesn't have to be complicated. And we do this for particularly Informa, one of the biggest event organizing companies, or one of the biggest companies that owns lots of event formats in the world, particularly for Aviation Week, but also a lot of their own internal events as well. And coming on to the screen share here, this lovely picture of Mike in his younger, fitter days. Sorry, Mike, because you can't talk, I'm going to have to take the mickey out of you slightly. But what you'll see on this is on our blog, so you can go to event.video if you want to read more. There are different types of things that we've done to create a hybrid event. So at a very simple level, this is a green screen studio in Atlanta. And then we were able to take...
You say simple. You weren't there doing it. I was.
I did think as soon as I said it.
Planning right there.
I thought that. Well, actually, let me ask you about that. So tell me, what's happening here is it's a financial services event. It's about fintech.
Yep.
It's in Atlanta, and this was during kind of in and out of the pandemic, so they weren't able to have a full event with an audience. So this is kind of in some respects for me, a more simple way of doing it, because there isn't an audience that I've got to worry about.
Right.
Tell us what you did and what the result was.
Yeah, so what we did, and I do apologize anyone who's late coming in. I'm losing my voice, but I'm going to try and explain this as best as I can. What we did is we hired a studio in Atlanta, green screen studio, and we, as you can see, a side-by-side comparison there. What we did is we placed two directors' chairs on the green screen, and we shot it and replaced the background in real time. So this is not coming into an editing software where we're removing it and then putting it in later. We're actually removing it as it's going out for broadcast and replacing it, a lot like what they would do with the weather. For example, everyone's seen a weather report and the guys or the girls will put the screen. It's a similar concept to that. The nice thing is it's we can do different angles and get them to look at cameras. And we also had a TV that they would talk to and the camera was right next to it so that they could interact with virtual speakers. And then the job of our global team was to take our output from the studio and mix it with virtual speakers. So from a viewing perspective, from an attendee, they would see a side-by-side screen, virtual studio as well. Sorry, the speakers coming in virtually, as well as the green screen studio, and it was all mixed together. So we basically did all that on the fly, and that was a 3-day event that lasted. I would say the longest day that we did was about 14 hours, because it ran from 8 o'clock in the morning European time right the way through to 7 p.m. Asian time. So it was like all day long. It was a big undertaking, but a lot of fun. And we also had to do something where we had to switch out the set pretty quickly, take the chairs away, get people set up for the next thing, and then put everything back. And we had about 3 minutes to do that. So it was a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, the show calling. Well, I mean, great result, and that was so that's a good example of a green screen studio that you can rent. Mike, I'm going through your blog post here. So TDK, just really quickly, this guy here is doing something similar to me. I say this guy is the CEO of TDK. Yeah. He's using a green screen, and he's using probably software like ManyCam or something similar to manipulate what's actually coming through as his webcam. Is that right?
Actually, I don't think that's the case. I think this was actually shot on a green screen, and then they did post. This was a pre-recorded piece of content that we played at the beginning. So interestingly, his video looks slightly better than everyone else's because he had time. Everyone else was doing theirs live, so they polished his. He's the CEO. I understand that they want to do that, so it's fine. But yeah, there was his pre-record was shot on a green screen, digitally composited onto a backdrop, and then everyone else did theirs live, similar to what you would do with Zoom, where green screens knocked out with a static background.
So I'm just going to come on. I didn't realize he wasn't live, but you can. I mean, I'm live now. You can do exactly the same thing if you got the software on your computer. And the software I recommend if you're going to do it from home is ManyCam. It's pretty cheap, and I think there's even a free version of it just to get going with. This next one is actually from London, so you might see the Shard just slightly there in the background. And this is an internal town hall type meeting conference for Informer. Now, to answer one of the questions that we got here from Rohit about separate video cameras for virtual and then separate cameras for video on the physical video wall projector. So there are a few things going on here. You can see possibly 2 cameras here. I always use at least 2 cameras. That's the first thing. I never use one camera. So I can have one close up and I can have one wide. That's no different to what we were doing before. But we're live streaming in this case. We're actually going into Microsoft Teams. So thinking about all those event platforms, we love Hopin as well, Brella, Grip, Swapcard, probably the 4 big ones we see. And of course, VII events doing something very different here, which I think is really interesting. I love being in virtual London. But here I am in London, and we are streaming into Teams. So what we're doing is just manipulating what Teams thinks somebody's webcam is, and it's actually us in the room doing all sorts of clever shots as we would normally. In terms of audio, that's probably the first thing that we have to think about, where we've got remote speakers as well. So somebody on the stage and then somebody remote talking. We have to make it so that they can see each other. And we also have to line those things up. So I'm going to switch to a little behind the scenes. Excuse the slight, I mean, it's not too bad actually, but exclude the slight messy wires here. This was before we got going. But this is from Norway in December, and it shows you the kind of setup that you need to do a proper hybrid. What's happening is that on the left and actually on the right, you can't see the right-hand screen, we have our live stream, our studio software. We're actually logged into the studio because very often a live stream is delayed by up to 20 seconds in the case of Vimeo. This TV here is what the speakers on the stage are looking at when there's a remote guest. So if anybody's remote, they're looking at this screen, and you'll see my cameras cunningly are right over the screen. So the eye line, basically, just as I'm looking into my webcam now, talking to you, the eye line works for this. if you're on the stage and you're talking to somebody remote, you're looking in the right place. You're not looking down at the floor at a comfort monitor. You're looking at a screen that's got them on. Just a bit further beyond that, you see laptops, and also there's equipment there for mixing the live stream, so switching between the different angles. And actually what we're doing here is using cloud-based software as the studio. So that's where our output to the projector is. We've got the mix of the virtual speakers. And I should also say for hybrid, at least 7, I think, speakers switched to going virtual from actually saying they were going to be in the room in Norway. And that's for a variety of reasons. One was the spread of Omicron. Second was things that just came up with their job. And I think the world's changed a bit. Now you're kind of expected to do things online, whereas before you might have said, I'm going to a conference in San Francisco, can't really get away with it, perhaps if you've got a senior job. But it also had a little bit of a benefit, because certainly one of the companies that was presenting, we actually ended up with a much more senior speaker, albeit not in person, they were virtual, than we would have had at the conference. So it's not all bad, basically. There are some other ways of doing this. Now, the event platform here, which was Brella, enabled people to network offline. And it was kind of weird as well to see people on an event platform with the live stream playing in the room where the action was also happening. So this hybrid world at first is quite interesting to look at. A little bit further down the desk beyond the mixing software is basically all of the microphones. So that's where the system for managing, the speaker's microphones and also sending the right things to the projector. So this is, at least in my world, this is one of the simplest setups for a hybrid event. If you want to live stream, if you want people to appear remotely, and it worked perfectly. So this was 2 days. I said to my guys afterwards, it was a 10 out of 10 event. We had no issues except for one, which was the fixed internet in the hotel. So obviously to live stream, you need internet. The fixed internet in the hotel stopped working, and we actually switched to Wi-Fi, which I would never recommend to any of you, because you're sharing the Wi-Fi with everybody else. It's not, I mean, basically anybody who's into live streaming, you never do that. We had to do it. Fortunately, it was during a break. And we actually found out later on that the event organizers had forgotten to book the fixed internet from the venue. We talked about it a few times, but I guess there's lots of other things like COVID that are more of an issue when you're planning events at the moment. So actually, to be fair to the hotel, the service wasn't paid for, and I think that's why it stopped working on day 2. But as far as everybody remotely was concerned and in the room, they didn't even notice. We just switched internet connections. So this is a kind of fairly simple setup. In terms of pricing, I think realistically you're looking at the sort of $15,000 to $20,000 range. In Europe, and as far as I'm aware, also in places like Singapore where I've worked, Hong Kong, the internet, I mean, I wouldn't say it's free, but I think in this hotel it should have been about 300 euros, which is roughly $300, slightly more in dollars at the moment. In America, you can pay an absolute fortune for internet, and I don't really understand why. I think over time that will change, and the rest of the world will catch up. But yeah, that's a very quick example.
One of the quotes that we heard was like $20,000 for just internet. So, know the venue that you're hosting your event in, know what's included, would be one of the key things that I would say look into before you book anything, because that is, if you're live streaming, that dedicated line out is just so important to do the job well.
I think another thing that's coming back, absolutely right, Mike. So very similar system here in London that we're using. And there are a few tricks with the audio as well. So one of the things you have to worry about is kind of what they call a mix minus or a feedback loop. So if anybody's into audio, you have to think about the microphones in the room not picking themselves up, for example, which can cause issues. I think also one of the things that has struck me about hybrid is the quality of the video that you need to be showing. So this was true for virtual, but I think for a while, a lot of people were getting away with Zoom, for instance, which works brilliantly. Don't get me wrong. We do conferences on Zoom, but there are much better tools. If you're looking at cloud-based tools, things like StreamYard, now EVMux, if you've not come across that, but also vMix, Wirecast in the more traditional world. And part of the reason is you want it to look like a TV show. So if you're planning video, I would always say, I always arrive at least the day before, partly for setup, but also so that I can go around the area and film. And in the case of Norway, I mean, it's one of the most spectacular countries in the world. So we had things like countdown timers showing the city that we were in, the boats, the mountains. Also, I'd advise people to do some sponsor interviews when they're on site. And all of that can be used in the content for the live stream. So this merging of perhaps what we were doing before live streaming became popular, where we were filming things and then editing and maybe delivering it 3 weeks after the event. Now we're doing it at the event. And that's also something to think about. I mentioned the cloud briefly. We're a big fan of the cloud. Who isn't? For streaming, still catching up a little bit, I think, with other sectors. There's still a big belief that you need lots of equipment. And certainly in Europe, where I'm predominantly based, that's a problem, because you can't easily take lots of equipment to smaller events or mid-size events. If you're dealing with Mobile World Congress, then fine, I can fill out carnets and I can send a truck and I can do all this kind of thing. But if it's a smaller event, there just isn't the budget for that. So we switched to the cloud a while back, and that's really been paying dividends, particularly during COVID. So the example that I gave earlier, I'll give you a different view of the same event. There was only two of event.video technicians, myself and a guy called Paul, who's based in Berlin. There are only two of us at this event, running the cameras and running the mixing software. We had a third guy, technician, who is based in India, and he was dealing with remote guests because the studio was remote. And then we had the local team who were doing the microphones and just basically sending the right images to the projector. So in effect, there were four people, but really there were three people working full time. And if you compare that to running an event, say, I don't know, certainly 10 years ago, but maybe even 5, there will be 8 to 10 people to do a live stream. So the cloud is starting to have a big impact. It's more about the camera work, the overall content for your event, than it is necessarily about having all the gear and perhaps no idea on how to use it. Now, if I was doing a much bigger conference, Mobile World Congress as an example, then yes, I would have a lot more equipment on site. But for these medium size events or smaller events, this was about 200 people. This system worked perfectly, and of course was a lot cheaper for the client as well. Now, I think I've hit the end of our time because we only had 20 minutes. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask. You can put them in the chat or you can come on screen.
Anyone got any questions?
I think it's difficult to ask a question, but Rohit's given us the thumbs up and is clapping. So thanks, Rohit. I mean, Rohit's a good example of somebody who's an absolute genius with vMix, which is one of the bits of software for streaming, and has kind of joined us in this cloud journey. Here's Vanessa.
Yes. That's, well, but yeah, now I'm here.
Hi.
Well, guys, thanks for your presentation. Very nice, very easy to understand all the topics. Congrats for that. That's is a hard task to do. So congratulations. I just want to know, what's your tips or your advice for meeting planners doing the new needs that we have in nowadays? Because people say that events, especially the hybrid one, must have TV production. But we are not, I mean, we are going to a new world for us. We know TV, we know of the process, but there is still a lot of missing points of understanding of how to get the best results for our clients. What's your suggestion for that?
Can I ask you another couple of questions about your events? Are you running more than one event, and are they in different places, or is it one big event a year?
I'm running a lot for myself, but I'm also one of Brazil's biggest influencers about events, especially hybrid events. I'm going to release my another book That's my 10th book about digital events, which means that I most produce content for the Brazilian market, then also produce huge events. But among my students has some of the Brazilian's biggest companies and also some multinational companies like IBM or 3M or Husker in several economic sectors, which means that you should mention everyone, the smaller than the biggest one.
Great.
Please.
Well, and are you in Brazil right now? Is that the backdrop that I see
Yes.
with the beautiful tree? Lovely.
Yes, yes, we're in the summertime.
Well, you're very lucky. We're in the winter. So the first thing that I would say is to take a holistic approach to content. So what I mean by that is what really matters is what the viewer sees. So for example, I can use much more simple tools to live stream. Something like StreamYard is pretty cheap, and it's also accessible for you and for other people to stream, for example, to LinkedIn. Let's say you want to run a show on LinkedIn. But I spend a bit of time making StreamYard look a bit better than it normally does. So I have a nicely designed background. We have a little 10-second video that starts every session, which we call a sting video in the UK. And it just gives it that kind of little bit of TV, kind of like, well, we're starting, and also how you look on the screen. So a lot of the feedback on that is, oh, this is better than Zoom, which it is because it looks a little bit nicer. Now, if you're doing an event that's got a little bit more budget, then I would spend some time telling people about the location. And that's why I asked you where you are, because it looks lovely. There's a nice tree outside. Maybe there's a beach. I don't know. But to me, tuning in, I don't really know any of that. Well, I wish... but to me, tuning in, I don't know any of that. So I, for example, would create a countdown timer. So just a simple, maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's 60 seconds, and it's counting down, and it's showing you the location. Maybe it's showing you the hotel, or maybe it's showing you the exhibition if you want. I personally prefer kind of a more travel theme. So a lot of my countdown timers are literally the local area. That, again, adds a little bit more to your overall production. I think there's also some technical things which hopefully we're all becoming familiar with. So practicing with people before they get to the show, if they're not familiar with speaking, having a good microphone, using headphones rather than shouting at your computer, because sometimes there can be issues, other sounds. I think I just heard one actually on yours, and I've just hit my microphone, so you probably heard some noise from me. If you can avoid those kind of things, you're taking the production quality up a little bit. And then finally, if sponsors are the big thing for you, I always think, where's the sponsor advert? Where's the video for the sponsor? So, if your event is really paid for by sponsors, there should be some opportunities for them. Because what we know, and it's not my statistic, it's actually Swapcard's statistic, that at a virtual event, over 80% of the time that your delegates are in the event, they're looking at a video, whether that's a round table like this using Whereby, which is the tool that we're using here, or whether it's a live stream. So you need to make that, kind of keep them awake. And I think there are also some statistics that might help you. So at the start of the pandemic, if you'd asked me what's the longest people will watch a live stream, it was about 45 minutes. Now it's about 30 minutes. So the time is going down, not up. And the longest that I have ever seen was 1 hour and 6 minutes. And I'm talking about average for the whole viewership. So, if you have 100 people on average, they stay 30 minutes. The one that was the longest was about car design. And literally we went into Jaguar's design studio. So if you loved cars, it was like it was like Christmas, basically. It was amazing. Still only just over 1 hour. So when you're designing events, a lot of people think, well, I have to pack the content in. That's fine, but just realize, I don't know if you've watched all of this event or if you've come in and come out. I've come in and come out because I've got some proposals to write. I had to make some phone calls. That's normal for a lot of people. So back to TV, how are you keeping my attention for 30 minutes, for example? So hopefully that gives you a few ideas.
also to add to that, how are you going to make sure that people can still see that content afterwards? So, for example, we did an event in August in Dallas. It was a hybrid event for Informer, and all day people were standing up in the middle of presentations, taking phone calls, and I'm like, okay, well, fortunately for them, we've recorded all of this, so it's available on demand after the event for them to catch up. So it's making sure that there is a reason for people to continue coming back even after the event is over and use that content. We're already streaming it, so it's recorded somewhere. Whereas in the past, if you had an in-person event, you had to pay for a crew to be there to record it specifically. As a live streaming company, we're already doing that as a byproduct of live streaming. So it's great because our clients can see a use case for the content after it's been aired.
Amazing answer. I just love it. Can I do one more question, or there is somebody in line for that?
Sure. No, you can. You can. It's Rohit. Rohit's a friend, so we'll wait. We'll make Rohit wait. Go for it.
Just one more. I was thinking that, and I think that it's correct, that the most important thing that the media organizer and clients must have is to find very, 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 very nice supplier. Because when you are in events, it's a time is as a second. It can be anything can be wrong, and can be anything, and anything can be wrong. That's for sure. But that means that you have to choose the supplier very well. And so, what's the skills that you recommend that we look for when we hire and hire a video company, or any other tips that you might find for us? Because if you choose the wrong way, the solution would be not the best one for you and your client. So I think the most important is to choose the company perfectly, the best one for you, that understands you. What's the skills that we have to look for?
I think the first secret. Well, sorry, Mike. The first secret is to start small. So if you meet a new supplier and you have not worked with them before, don't do it for your biggest conference. Do it for a smaller one. Learn about the people. Perfect. So if you look at Aviation Week, which I showed you there, we've worked with them on, I think, 14 events. So they know me personally. We've been for a coffee lots of times. We've traveled to different places. And so if there is a problem, they know how I work and that I can fix things. And I think that's partly why we're hired. In fact, they've told me that is because they just know that I will fix things. You know, like the internet. I didn't go to them saying there's a big problem. I just fixed it with the hotel. So I think that's really, really important. But Mike, you were going to chip in there.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I think a lot of when people look at when event organizers are looking for a live streaming partner or a video production partner, they ask the questions about the technology that's being used, how they're going to solve problems, the quality of their work. And one thing that's often overlooked is how do you interact with our speakers? And you have to remember that, like, we're going to be seeing your speakers just as much probably as you are, and we're going to be dealing with them when they're at their most nervous, their most vulnerable. You know, they might have had an internet issue, as has been the case, you know, many times before, where they jump on and it's the last second before they're supposed to go live, and you've got to calm them down. You've got to say, look, it's okay, we've got you, we understand that you've had a technical issue at home. So it's all about like how we interact in our case with those speakers, because some of these people took months to line up, and all it takes is one wrong interaction for them to say, well, I'm never coming back here again.
Yes.
So that is something, unfortunately, that I think gets overlooked. You know, oh, they're the most technically minded company in the world. That's fantastic, but they've got zero people skills. And so they can undo an event so fast for you. And also, you know, how they handle their own stress. You know, the situation, you don't want a vision mixer, for example, people that push the buttons to you don't want to be able to see the panic on their face when something's going wrong. You want to see them very calm, very collected. It might be, you know, a duck underwater, but you know, above they're very calm, and they know exactly what they're going to do to fix the problem.
I will hire your company if you are in Brazil, for sure.
I'm sorry?
I will hire your company if you work in Brazil, because the approach you gave
fortunately for you,
is exactly the one I look for. That's
fortunately
amazing.
for you, we're a global company, so
we
do work all over the world.
We have to talk then. It would be my pleasure
to
show your company around here. Don't worry about it. It would be my pleasure.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
We'd love that. Thanks, Vanessa. We'll connect with you. I'm just going to close this session because I think we've run a bit over, but what a great conversation. And Rohit did actually make a comment. So he's talking about should you do hour-long sessions, multiple ones? Should you do half day, full day? The points that I was making about attention really to do with your content is not the same. I'm not saying to you do 30-minute events. I'm just saying that on a live stream, people will probably hang around for about 30 minutes. And that's true for this session as well. I think we've actually been on for about 35. So thank you very much for taking part. You'll find us on the platform if you want to connect, or you can just look at event.video. That's our website. It's just simply event.video. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you. Yeah, hope to connect with some of you outside of the platform. Thanks. And Chris, good to see you.
Bye.